everybody, let's point to order the March 2017 SAP project periodic oversight report. Let's start with introductions. We're starting this time.
Zig Burson, Zico Consulting.
Paul Byrne, Deputy Municipal Manager.
Dick Trainer Summit.
Great Johnson.
Pete Peterson.
Heidi from Third, Quebec.
Mike Chapman from True Audit.
Rose Foley, Assembly Budget Analyst.
Young lady.
Rosella Young, Assembly Counsel's Office.
Thank you. Okay, so you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much for being here. This is the March 2017 report. I changed the graphic. It's now not a person that's frustrated. It's a screeching halt in the sense that it's pretty clear that the team is not going to make July 3rd, 2017 go live. That was announced to the Functional Steering Committee last week. So now it's just a matter of replanning what needs to be done and what needs to go forward. The major hang-up has been the whole idea of verifying and validating the data that's necessary to be in place to run the second systems integration test cycle.
Let me, just for the record, recognize that Mr. Delbar has joined us. Thank you. And Mr. Wellington, thank you very much. Jeff.
Shall I continue? Okay. So this is the master plan. This is the official master plan that the team was working under, and I just kind of wanted to show you that red line basically says that's approximately calendar-wise where the team is supposed to be. And as you can see, in terms of the summary line items there, nothing is close to being on schedule. A lot of tasks, a lot of detail, there's no question about that. But basically all the major pieces are behind. And I've already mentioned to you that getting the data ready has been the big problem. So the bottom line is they're not going to be able to go live by 7/3. So a couple of observations about the work plan, and just anomalies that I'm sitting there thinking, why are these things happening? The OCM realization phase activities, to say they're nearly 80% complete, I mean, that's in the plan, but if it looks like they keep going until June 30th, I can't quite understand why that would be the case if you're 80% complete. User acceptance testing, that's UAT, planning was supposed to have started in February, should be done now. There's absolutely no progress, no activity on that, planning the user acceptance testing, which is fairly important in the sense that you've got to understand which people are going to be running the actual tests, who's going to be responsible for them, and what are the various scripts that you're going to need to run, because that becomes the major point as far as contracting relationships with SAP, because then you basically sign off and say, we accept the system. It's a big deal. Performance testing was conducted at the beginning, the preparation was conducted in 2016, but the summary says there's 0% progress. To me, that's an anomaly. I don't understand why it would be that way if you've done some work. If you take a look at training's estimated 280 elapsed days, if you say that's reasonable, and that's what's in the plan, in the duration set, and they're saying they're 60% complete, that would mean that they need another 22 weeks to finish, and another 22 weeks takes the training out to August. And that's only priority 1 and 2 training. If you recall last month, we talked about the fact that everybody had come to the conclusion they can't even deliver priority 3 training. Okay, not enough budget at the time. So those are just some anomalies that I obviously spent some time looking a little more closely at the project plan this month. So let's ask the question, which way is the project trending? Is the project really moving forward? Is there any chance whatsoever of you having to pay bonus clauses to SAP? And after the 3 one-month delays that occurred at the end of last year in the 4th quarter, and there's been another major delay in 2017, will the project drag some more? Well, my responses are, yes, the project is progressing, but it's progressing slowly. I don't think you have to worry about paying SAP any bonuses, because that was all about bringing things in early. And then in terms of, will the project drag some more? And I would emphatically say, yes, it will. Okay, let's talk a little bit about project governance. I've used the revolving the door metaphor several times. You know, I kind of, some of that stuff continues on. If you recall, I was very concerned that we didn't have an employee, a Muni employee as part of the leadership team once Kim left. Well, they replaced her, okay? They replaced her. That person has been on for 2 weeks now. But I find it rather interesting that there seems to be some confusion about what that person's responsible for. And when you have confusion in terms of responsibilities and accountability, then something could fall through the crack. And the 3 areas that Kim was responsible for, interfaces, enterprise content management, and reporting, are the ones that theoretically her replacement would be responsible for. And like I say, there's some confusion about that, not only with that individual, but also with the rest of the team. Part of the revolving door, I mean, I don't know if I have the right numbers here, but I know Alden has been suffering through a lot of turnover with the administrative staff for a lot of different reasons, okay? Most recently, if you recall, there was an individual that ended up jumping out of a burning building and was injured fairly badly. Well, that was one of his administrative support people. So he's going through the throes of trying to get some folks there. But the point is those are the folks that are actually collecting all the time reports, collecting the expense reports, and generating all those weekly run rates that I get a copy of, as well as the project cost to date kind of information. So, needless to say, I've only got information up through the end of February at this time. So speaking of the run rates, so this is just kind of an update on what's happening as far as the running costs. As you know, there have been quite a few offshore developers have been working on the project, as well as testers. The offshore developers are mainly in India, Pakistan, those areas. The offshore testers are mainly in South America. Okay, so that has driven the average rate per hour down. Okay, folks in India, I think their average rate per hour is about 90, and their average rate per hour is about 60 in South America. There's been a lot of negotiating with SAP with regard to getting SAP to invest in the project. That's still going on. I don't think change orders have been finalized and agreements have been finalized as yet, but that is going on. But once that happens, then presumably that average rate will drop even more, because the way they invest is basically to provide new resources without charging for them. Okay? Expenses are still running about 15% of fees. The weekly run rate near the end of 2016 was right around $400,000 a week. It shot up in the first quarter. So the last 2 weeks that I have from February, the last 2 weeks of February, they were in excess of $500,000 a week. Okay. Now again, if some of that investment comes through, then those numbers will drop down. I think, as we go forward, we're recognizing that there will be some investment by SAP, that probably the run rate will get to be more like $475 over the next couple of months. Okay? You saw this last month. I think Alden presented this to you, and then I made some adjustments to it last month. I said, oh, by the way, we haven't been getting some SAP invoices, and so I used the run rate numbers to basically say, okay, here's some adjustments from 1/1 to 2/16, so that we could kind of get a better picture, a more timely picture of total charges. Now, I don't have any information other than the run rates of what's happened since then up through the end of February. So I do have those numbers, and so I've added those in there to say, oh, by the way, so one adjustment was almost $3 million, and then to get us at least caught up in terms of charges, estimated charges, we're another $1.1 million to take us through 3/4. Okay? So what's the outlook? You've approved, the budget increase of 4.5 million, but the intent of that was to take everybody through go live. That was what it was all about. It was to take everything through 7.3. All right. The project now will not go live 7.3. That means it will go longer. Okay. Assuming that there is some downward adjustment in the contractor resource hours, because you start stretching, and I know that Alden's been working very hard with the SAP organization to say, wait a minute, we don't need those people for a while. Let's try to back off. I know, for instance, the testers are not charging any time; they're not working right now because there's just simply nothing for them to test. So some of that stuff is starting to come down a little bit, and that's appropriate. So we can see that the run rate very quickly is probably going to drop to about 350,000 a week. So as such, if you want to do some estimating, you can multiply each week expected beyond July 30th. I think they're still behind throughout July 30th, but you can probably use that run rate of 350 until the third integration test cycle is completed. Because you're still going to need the developers. They have to fix things that are broken. You're still going to need the testers to do the testing, and that stuff's going to happen. Okay? After the third integration testing, the run rate should drop to about 250,000 per week. So as you look at the back end, do some multiplying times the number of weeks, you come up with some estimates. Okay, I'd like to bring us back full circle and talk about critical success factors a little bit. If you recall, about, I think in December we said, hey, we've got 20 of these critical success factors that we've been talking about in terms of how is the organization doing. And I told you then, and I'm telling you now, that some of them are still not being really successfully applied. So I don't think that we're managing very well by milestones. I think that we're tending to repeat history. There is an improvement in the fact that the IT organization is doing some planning in terms of what's going to happen post-go live. As an example, Steve Burns, the replacement for Kim, is going to be, without a doubt, he's going to be the person responsible for SAP after go live. I mean, that seems to be clear. So that's good. Progress reporting to leadership. They used to provide, summary reports of the progress and use a dashboard and all that kind of thing. Went to the executive steering committee. That's not been happening for the last few months. Critical pathing. We keep leaving some things out of the story in terms of the plan, such as the time clocks. They talk about them, but it's not in the plan. Adjusting the plans to reality, it means we got to recognize if we're not going to go live on July 3rd, when are we going to go live? And why do we want to continue to struggle for several weeks with that particular question? I mean, the team knows how long it's going to take to do the tasks. We certainly need to define success. That gets into this whole issue of, well, what's going to be there at the end of the day. So we added critical success factor number 21. Avoid reactionary project management. You can see what my graphic is implying. And I found this cartoon I thought was interesting because the team is going after a lot of alligators. They're trying to kill the alligators. But when you try to kill the alligators, other stuff keeps sitting out there waiting in the weeds to get you. Okay? So the executive steering committee is only right now focusing on what are the major issues. The big one is finish the data preparation for SID 2. And that's where they're spending all their energy. Okay? The project management office has a tendency to focus on exactly the same thing. Okay? And then there's an awful lot of preparatory tasks in the project plan. And presumably, preparatory tasks need to be done before the following task is executed. Well, if you don't do the preparatory tasks, how are you going to execute the following task? That's the T-Rex that I think might be sitting out there in the weeds waiting for the team. So still looking at the plan, some more anomalies. Items that have 0 to low progress, 0% complete, that appear to be on the critical path. There's a task in there that says we got to prepare for integration testing cycle 3. It's 30 days. That's what's in the plan. 30 days. Now, the way the plan operates is days are work days. That's 6 weeks. Okay? Planning the user acceptance testing, it's not even in the plan. The task is not there, no estimate for it. Prepare the training platform, they say in the plan, it's 15 days, 3 weeks. Well, the training people are saying I need to have a platform, a computer, a system available so that I can create what's the word I'm looking for? So I can create examples, the various cases that they need to go through, so they can try to work through using the system, and they need a system to do that. Okay, and then there's a delivery training preparation. This is all about planning and scheduling and organizing and getting people set up for the training classes. That's 4 weeks. Okay. Items in progress that require some time to complete. So I took a look at the items in there that they had a % complete, and I said, okay, if I take the % complete and apply it to the calendar duration of that task, what's left? This is what's left. To say, to finish the financial reports that were necessary for, are you ready for this? Integration test cycle 1, which everybody said was done. Okay? And they knew this. I mean, they said, okay, there's going to be a series of scripts that we're not going to do in integration test cycle 1. Everybody knew that. But the point is, at some point, you still have to do them. And here they are. We get 3 weeks worth of, we got to finish the reports for integration test cycle 1. Presumably, you'd want to have those so that you run them in integration test cycle 2. And it says, we have to prepare, develop, code, and unit test reports for integration test cycle 3. That's in the plan. But that one says 60 days. So if you sit there and say, well, I can't do, or I shouldn't be doing test cycle 3 before I finish doing all these reports, then the earliest I could potentially run test cycle 3 is 5 divided into 60 is 12 weeks, 3 months. Okay. They're numbers. Okay? Complete the environment build, that goes on forever. I couldn't figure out why that goes on forever. Okay. ECM functional configuration, it actually said that there's still calendar-wise 30 days of work necessary to finish the configuration of ECM. Now it's mainly HR right now, as I understand. AP and PO are pretty much finished, but that's still HR. But still, that's 30 days is 6 weeks. Okay? The other thing that's interesting is nothing following this in the plan. There's nothing in the plan that says, what do I do next for ECM? Okay? OCM deployment readiness, that's basically, get ready for, all the change management activities, and that's 30 days to finish. User support preparation is a line item in there. It says, okay, that's 60 days, work days to finish. And then finish preparing for SIT 2 is 5 days. Well, that was as of last week. This week, the team came to the conclusion that they really didn't want to cut off data preparation and not be finished. So they decided to add another week. So there's another week that's been added to that. So all of a sudden, SIT 2 is not going to start on April the 3rd, it's going to start on April the 10th. Okay? So there's some downline critical path items. Security testing must precede SIT 3, that's important. That's going to go on during SIT 2, that makes sense. I want to talk about CAFR reporting. CAFR reporting was concluded months ago that I'm not going to have enough time to get CAFR reporting developed prior to go live. So it was going to be pushed off. Mainly because, you don't really need the CAFR reports until early 2017. Okay? 18, excuse me, thank you. So, but the plans, there's an estimate in the plan that says the elapsed time to develop 10 CAFR reports is 80 days, 80 work days. That's in the plan. Okay? But I'm sitting there thinking, well, if you're going to work on those and you have some time to do it, one would think that you'd want to include the execution of the CAFR reports in your user acceptance testing. One would think, okay? But if that's the case, you better get going on those CAFR reports. We already talked about the fact that training platform needs to be in place, and we certainly, it's clear that the course material must precede the delivery of the training. Okay? Critical success factor 22. We really got to avoid planning the plan. The team seems to be hung up on that. They're doing an awful lot of planning and replanning, and boy, does that slow things down. So here's something from Dwight Eisenhower. He said, the plan is nothing, the planning is everything. In other words, the final values of planning variables are less important than understanding the relationship between the variables, which is all this business I've been talking about, critical path, sequencing. Don't do everything all at one time. Don't have everything going on parallel. Okay? Because as soon as you do the sequencing, you get milestones. All right? So in terms of some historical focus, there's been a lot of energy spent by the team on making sure they have perfect plans. All right? Each iteration, rather than tailoring the prior iteration, has had a tendency to be a complete rewrite. The current plan that was done in January, which took, I think, almost 3 months to finally get published, was a complete rewrite of the prior plan. Right? And now we're faced with it happening again. We've got to replan this thing. We've got to know what's going to happen and what our go live date is. Okay? Got to know. So right now, there's the team is I call it squirming. They really don't want to put pencil or paper because all of a sudden it becomes public and all of a sudden it becomes a lock in terms of what's going to happen because of the relationship from a contractual perspective. The SAP folks are waiting for the changeover. Okay, what's the result of avoiding critical pathing? Most tasks right now seem to be getting it at the same time, and they seem to require pretty close to the same amount of time. I'm talking about the sort of middle-level summary tasks, not the real minute detail. Some examples. I mean, I can't understand why priority 1 training and priority 2 training wouldn't be sequential. Why wouldn't that's the purpose of the prioritization, isn't it? These are first, these are important enough. These are the next important ones. Doesn't reflect that in the plan. Okay? There's some tasks that really are not reflected in the plan. Makes sense in my mind. We ought to have the time clock Kava portion of the plan in there. It's not in there. It's being treated offline. They talk about it in PMO. They talk about dates and they talk about progress. I don't argue that. It's not in the plan, so I don't know how the program manager can manage it. Okay? Contracting has always and has been for the last X number of years now been a slowdown for this organization and for this project. Okay, and we're looking at a 331. The AMS contract is going to die, and there needs to be a new contract in place. I've been told that it'll get signed by Friday. Okay, but boy, I wouldn't want to wait that long. So this is a reminder of how the plan looks. Again, everything is behind. Okay, and these are all the durations that are in the plan. Okay, and here's their percent complete. So then what I'm going to show you is I took a look at all this and I said, well, let's take a look at what happens if I kind of look at these summary activities and look at those percent completes and what's left in terms of duration and how does the plan sort of fall out. If I can make some understanding with regard to sequencing and critical path natures, what's a precedent and what isn't. I think the thing that's interesting, see this column right here, that's precedent. Which tasks have to be done before the next one is done? Okay. Now, do you notice that that's empty except for the last one? Okay, so there's no intermediate precedent planning going on. Some of the detailed ones are. They do that in detail. But that's because everything's happening at one time. Okay. So what's the outlook? There is absolutely no question in my mind, and I think it's been publicly stated to the financials, to the functional steering committee, the project will go beyond 7.3. Now the question, of course, immediately becomes, how far? Right? My opinion, it's very unlikely that a mere 4-week extension is going to work. It's my opinion. Okay? A few weeks ago, the team was targeting the beginning of SIT 2 on Monday, and I just told you that's already moved a week. Okay? So SIT 2 gets moved because of that. And I would also say to you that clearly the team is exhausted. They are, and the morale is starting to really die. Okay? They have worked hard. They have worked hard. The people that have been working on this data issue have been working weekends, long hours. I mean, it's been there. I mean, the effort, without a doubt, has been there. The Muni folks stepped up to the plate. Kudos to them. So you have some options about going live. I mean, it's not just a matter of, oh, let's stick a couple of weeks out here at the end. You need to pay attention to, oh, are we doing it on a month beginning? Okay, those kind of questions. Are you going to do it mid-quarter versus quarter end? Okay. July 3rd was picked because it's a quarter. I mean, did you have a question?
We're going to let you finish.
Okay. Okay. So the thing we have to remember is if you start talking about a mid-quarter go live, and so in our case, what does that mean? That means August or September. Okay? And presumably the beginning of the month, all right? So it's either August 1 and September 1, whatever the first work day is. But according to SAP, to do that requires additional work that's really unplanned. It wasn't part of what needed to be done. So they're saying that that would translate into a need for a change order and a need for additional funding to take care of that. Okay? Most likely go live, this is now me talking, is really October 2. All right? That's the beginning of the fourth quarter. You have a lot less issues with regard to W-2s. You basically have everything the way you set structured it and the way you put it together and the way you planned it as far as data is concerned and so forth. It's pretty much in place and you don't have all this extra work that SAP contends that needs to be done. However, the extension adds elapsed time, and elapsed time adds more hours. Needless to say, you're going to see more dollars. Okay? But I have been told that the two numbers might be a wash. I redid the plan assuming an October 2 go live. I want to show you a high level, and then I'm going to actually bring up the other plan document very quickly so you can see some of the stuff, because you can't see all this. But notice there are some things that I've done here. I mean, these green bars, those are the things that originally were not going to be included. But if you go to an October 2 go live, in theory, you can pick up some of the things that you were going to push beyond go live, and you can now take care of them. So the big long green bar up here, where's my light? That is the CAFR reports. Does it need to be 80 days long? I mean, that's Okay, we can have people discuss that and work that and figure that out. The other two down here are the priority 3 training. The first bar is develop the material, and the second bar is actually conduct the training. Okay? The little red ones up here are the holidays. I just think it's important to know when the holidays hit you. Be prepared, know about it. All right? And you got 3 major ones: Memorial Day, July 4th, Labor Day. This one up here, that one up here, that's the one that says finish getting the data ready for integration testing cycle 2. And the other thing to recognize, if you start talking about using precedents, those are all little arrows. Those are all arrows that basically say, if I change that bar, if I push that out 2 weeks, then the rest of them get pushed 2 weeks, which is exactly what should happen. Okay? And you'll see that I've tried to put connections in throughout this project that at least seem to make sense. Now, I made some assumptions with regard to the paycheck parallel. Now notice I have changed the wording on that so you know and understand it's not a payroll parallel, it's a paycheck parallel. Okay? So there will be no time reporting and none of that stuff. It will just be, here's the PeopleSoft data that they used to issue a paycheck. Now run that data into SAP and here's, let's see if those paychecks all come out the same. And that's it. Okay? The rest of it hopefully will be looked at in user acceptance testing. So if you'll bear with me a second, I'm going to show you the plan. Where is it? Okay, so this is so you can see what's happening. But I found out, you'll note, you see all these precedent indications? Those are all the connections that make this system automatically work. All right? That's how this thing works. So I don't have to, I never touch a date. I never touch a date. I let the system work. But I did find out that one of my assumptions in here regarding payroll was wrong. Okay? I said that, it starts after 18, line 18, okay, which is way up here, and I was told that's not true. Okay, I just found that out just a couple hours ago, that it's really right after line paycheck, right after line, here it is, finish sit 2. Okay? So now, whoops. Oh, it changed it. I'm sorry. Time scale got changed automatically. Bottom tier. Bear with me, just won't take very long. Please. Well, if I have to do too much more of this, we'll have to give up on it. That's the reason. Months. Bottom tier. Days. Okay. Days, weeks. Sorry about that. Okay. But what I wanted to show you come on. The idea is that I should change this. And when I change that, all of these immediately will be adjusted. And so I messed up with regard to my timeline here, and that's still messed up. So it's hard to see. But if I say, okay, I'm taking away 18 and make this 26 only, So you see how that just automatically made that adjustment. But all I was trying to get at is, so I went through this process and tried to redo the plan at a summary level to try to show how it might make some sense, and also to try to figure out how far out will it go if you actually link the various pieces of the project sequentially. Where it goes is it goes to October. Okay, that's where it goes. All right. I think it's very doable, very workable, but that's just my opinion. Okay, I know the team is basically saying we don't know, we don't know, we don't know. Okay. So to kind of wrap up, so what are the pros of going October 3, which is quarter 4? It's a cut over to quarter. Yeah, there's an opportunity to ensure data integrity. That means everybody can finish up on all this data issue. There's an opportunity to include work product that was going to be post go live. So there's a chance to take care of the 32 reports, which now I think is changing. I'm just said over 30. But those reports were going to be done post go live. Now they can be done. Okay, the CAFRA can be done. One of the key data conversions that was deferred was all the HUD grants. That can now be done. Okay, and then same thing with Priority 3 training. Why would you want to defer your training after go live when you can, if you have the opportunity to go ahead and take care of that training and do it prior to go live? So those 4 items can all be picked up, at least in my opinion. The cons, there's no question it's an increased project cost. Okay? And you have to recognize that you still are going to have to do work with ECM. Okay. Now I did discover that the plan is that no document conversion is going to take place prior to go live. And the ECM is the scanning and storing of documents. Okay. So as new documents occur after go live, then your system would be used. But that also, you got to remember, it's only configured for those 3 areas: purchasing, payables, and HR. So that leaves projects, grants, all the other paperwork in the Muni still has to be configured in ECM. It's a post-go live project. Still must replicate Muniverse. We've talked about this. Muniverse is basically about 50 predefined queries. They exist, everybody loves them. They were done because people struggled with doing queries in PeopleSoft. Well, if they think they had trouble doing queries in PeopleSoft, there are at least, 30,000 tables in SAP. So doing queries in SAP will be complex, will be confusing, and I'm sure everybody will quickly say, I don't know how to do this, make it like Muniverse. Okay? That's out there as a project. Post go live. So, the dude has some thoughts about taking care of the staff. I think you need to take care of the staff. I think you need to take care not only the consultants, but also not only the Muni, but also the consultants. So they need a break. So here's the recommendation. Send the entire consulting team home for a long weekend so they can be with their families. That's the one thing they want more than anything else, is time with their families. And that makes all kinds of sense. Okay? Send all the Muni personnel that are on the project and send them to Alyeska for a long weekend. All expenses paid. Okay, now, before you overreact and say, wait a minute, you can't afford that, I understand that. Right? I think it's time for SAP to step up to the plate and make a grand gesture. I think they need to make a grand gesture. Okay? They need to make sure that the consultants who are not working and on the bench for a long weekend, that their time for them, and they're personally paid for it. Okay? Not by the Muni. Same thing, and then with the MOA Muni staff, I think SAP should step up to the plate and literally pay for that long weekend in Alyeska. So.
Okay, thank you
Questions?
very much. Mr. Train, the first one on the list.
Alden, question for you. It's always been 7/3/17. What is it going to be now? Go live date.
I think with Zig's presentation, for the most part on the date, I think it's probably a pretty realistic time frame that it's probably going to be that October time frame.
October 4th?
The pay, I don't have the dates here in front of me, Mr. Trainee, but it's somewhere around 11th or 14th of September is when we would start collecting time with the clocks, and then go live 3rd, 4th of October from a system perspective, whatever that fell on.
Another question, Madam Chair, if you don't mind. What's the cost? 'Cause there's going to be a cost.
There is a cost, and I've talked to Zig about this quite a bit, and he tried to incorporate some of those comments and so forth in there. As you saw, the declining amount of people and then so forth on there. We have a project that will have declining number of people, so using historical burn rates and so forth, I think is a little misleading and over what one would anticipate. Most of the development resources will be gone by that point in time, because through SIT 2 and 3, all the break fixes hopefully will be done. Some of the leadership, some of those extra, some positions we've had to double and triple up on because they had a high volume of work, should be able to get down to one in those kind of capacities. I've informed SAP that I'm going to actually, when we get to around July 3rd, review every single position on the project to make sure that they're a must-have type position to be able to do that. But as we've been burning about $2 million a month at our peak, I think that it's going to be less than that, but I would probably anticipate it's probably going to be between $3 and $4 million for that quarter. For that quarter, there is a lot of other factors that unfortunately impact or people have to think about by not doing a July 3rd date. That AMS contract that's still not signed. There's, we in the last assembly we went and got capital for that, but that was capital for 3 months. If the project needs another 3 months, we need 3 months more months of capital for that particular thing. However, that'll help our operating funds because that was supposed to be picked up by operating. So what we will have to look as we get closer to that, what funds we need, what might need to be reallocated, all those kind of things. But the lease on the building and sunshine. I mean, there's a lot of different factors out there that we were all targeting with that July go date that will have to be analyzed as we get closer here. And this whole presentation was basically the plan. The master plan was somehow woven all the way through this. It's hard to prepare a master plan when we don't have a go live date that we can count on, and it's hard to count on that when we have a date on data that continues to slide and be unknown. And many of these other areas in here that are behind or we need people, the unfortunate part, and I've been in front of you many, many times, is we have the exact same uni staff that's responsible for their entire area. That means the data. That means their reports. That means their training classes. That means all those pieces. So yes, training and reports sometimes get left because if we don't get data done, there's no way to get into SIT 2. So as those things go on, we have a limited number of people in our specialty roles, and we are tied, and that's, as Zig is correct, they are tired and burned out already, but that's the workforce that we have that is unfortunately responsible for all of that, and they also still have their regular job. There is a CAFR going on right now for the municipality of Anchorage. It just so happens that same person has to work on the new CAF reports, and has to work on the P&L for the data, and has to work on the training classes for those type of things. But when you have 1 or 2 people, we don't have a lot of options.
We're stretching them. Thank you. I just one more question. When we started this, we identified who we're from, and I heard somebody from KeyBank. I'm just wondering, what are you doing here, ma'am? Not that we don't want you here, but it's odd when KeyBank shows up at our meeting.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, Heidi is with KeyBank. KeyBank is, of course, the lender who has been helping us fund this project.
I know that.
Oh, yes. And so, anyway, for those of you who might not know that, KeyBank has worked on these ERP implementations across a wide spectrum of clients and customers, and they offered to come in and help us with a process review as we think about that post-go-live piece about how we can extract value from the program. So I thought it might be useful for them to just sit in and kind of come up to speed. Heidi, in this case, you're certainly welcome to speak for yourself, but she had been involved with some of the preliminary discussions 5, 6, 7 years ago when when this was being contemplated, what it would look like, and so forth. So she has some history. She obviously she's been out of the picture for a while, but I thought it would be helpful just for her to come up to speed on some of the items and issues, and so that later, as we're thinking about how we can extract value from this, that we'll have some folks that are willing to help us. And because we're one of their large customers, they've offered to do that for us at some point in the future for no cost. We necessarily work with the project team to make sure there's no impact on the project, but that's important too.
Thank you. Heidi, thanks for being here. If there's anything you want to say, please go ahead.
I think he properly explained it. We consider ourselves a partner. And so, as he said earlier, I was in at the very beginning. I was taking away from some other projects with Bob Bragg. And he had mentioned that you guys had hired this wonderful guy that's giving you these overlooks. And I was like, I would love to see an overlook and some of those project plans. Again, simply because we do want to be that partner and make this successful and make it worth it. And so that's just a piece of the more, I'm a strong believer, knowledge is power. The more I know, the more we can be facilitating and helping.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Train. Welcome, April. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you. Mr. Train, you already asked the main questions I wanted to, but I guess going off what you said, I don't think the public actually cares that much about whether they only interact with this much as we do, whether it goes live in July, August, September. What they care about is the cost. They want us to stop bleeding money. But it sounds like you don't have yet sort of solid numbers on, if you were to go live August, September, October, what are those 3 different costs, what they look like? Do either of you have those numbers?
As Mr. Trainee was asking for an estimate, and I hate to be able to put an estimate out because we don't know which exact staff, but as I mentioned, we're running $2 million a month right now.
Yeah.
It's not going to be that number because we're anticipating a substantial number of people rolling off as this project goes. But even with that being said, you're still going to have, you want to keep all your core consultants, because when you go live, there's at least a month, if not more, of go live support, and you want the people that develop the system to be here working hand in hand with all of our municipal staff to be able to get those final bugs once you're actually in a production environment. So we're going to work very hard to make sure the core consultants that have been here for years doing this, we keep. What we're going to be losing is a lot of the development people, because most of that work should be done. Testing will be, the testers will be done. And then we'll certainly be looking at a lot of the leads / PMO leadership kind of people to pare that administration down, because there's really a lot less work channels that are going on at that point in time. You're wrapping things up and you're just trying to carry the project through rather than having several people trying to do different work streams and so forth. But it's going to still be a substantial number, but it's not going to be anywhere close to what we're currently burning.
He mentioned the probably you would end up being at around $1 million a month. And if you go back to the run rates, that I'm familiar with, prior to ramping up, prior to all this ramp up, the project was running at $1 million a month. Okay, so you can sit there and say, all right, 3 months. It's pretty easy to make that kind of multiplication now. Is it going to be exactly that? No. Do you want to have some fudge factor in there? Probably. But I think that's why he was saying 3 to 4.
And Mr. Dunbar, when we just asked for some money and we have some contingency in there, and we had a few other things, I'm doing everything I can to try to minimize our current expense between now and July 3rd. So to say that we need all that money may not be the case. We may be able to conserve in some of these other areas. And the one thing, and I'm going to bring it up right now, because every single time you've been here, you put the little Tetris thing up there that has the green, yellow, and red. And we finally had several areas that went green yesterday, and he doesn't even show that. So this kind of irritates the hell out of me here a little bit, because of this data delay, we've actually had several of our work streams that have been able to catch up, and he doesn't show those things. So obviously we're hearing all the negative stuff all the way through here, but the reality is reports have caught up. We have 11 left. They're almost all FERC, which are extremely complex at the utilities at the very end. We started CAFA reports 2 weeks ago, And as Zig mentioned, we'd always planned on those things having to go later. We started the other 32 that we never even thought we were going to start during this process. Functional specs for those are going to be done tomorrow. So ECM on 2 of the work streams are 100% practically right now, so they're caught up. ER is almost done. So yes, while that has been killing us and killing our staff, we have been able to take the time to be able to use that on some of our work streams that we've been behind because they haven't been as critical as the core system. So in some of those areas, you would actually see that we're back where we wanted to be, where we need to be. And as Zig mentioned in one of his final slides, some of those things we never thought we were going to get to, now are going to actually be incorporated into our plan. And yes, if we happen to have a 3-month delay, we were going to have to do that work anyway at some point, whether it was at go live or after go live. And the data delay has certainly not been excited. We're not excited about having that delay, but some of those areas that we were maybe having to wait afterwards, we're actually going to be able to include within our core system when we go live. And those are some positives that we've been able to do over the last 6 weeks. And I can absolutely state, as I'm sitting here in front of you, we will begin SID 2 on the 10th. We will not, that day will happen. We are in very good shape right now as we're sitting here today, and we will hit that date, and we will start SID 2, which has been delayed for probably 6 weeks.
So it sounds like you agree with most of what Zig has said in terms of the timeline. Aside from that, his one sort of action item here is on page 34 when he talks about having the consulting team go home for a long weekend and perhaps setting some kind of paid vacation for MOA staff. Those are 2 different things with sort of different realities, but do you see either of those happening?
Well, the consultants, from my opinion, over the last 6 weeks, while they have been working, there may be a core ones that are working with some of our core data. Some of the other consultants have actually been finished with their work. We always talk about HCM being ahead of schedule, so those consultants I don't think have been burning the midnight oil like a couple of our other ones. We actually, the back office people who are the data people actually working on it, which is an SAP contractor, that person over there looks like he's dying. I mean, they're working till 2, 3 in the morning every day for the last 5 weeks. There are certain, so it would be targeted on the consultant side. There are definitely our core cadre of Muni staff, upwards of 10 people. They have been just doing whatever they possibly can to make it happen. Having SAP pay for our people to go on a weekend, I think, is probably a little far-fetched. There was a comment about what they were going to give us. I was going to make a slide comment. I got an idea if I offered that up what they would give me, but the reality is probably not they're going to pay for it. And as he also mentioned in here, we are still struggling to get resolution on a lot of the even though we've agreed in concept to actually get all the sales and contracting things done, the AMS contract, our change orders. So we are struggling with SAP to be able to finalize these things that we thought we've had agreement on. So there have been challenges on the sales side as well as the project side.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if the report is right that some of our people are getting possibly burned out, do we need to be looking at trying to recruit or hire some additional people?
Well, I've been here a little less than 2 years. From day one, we've expressed the fact that there was some money out there in the budgets for backfills and doing that. There were certain departments that took advantage of that, and certain other departments that worked it in a different way. But unfortunately, given that those are the same people that have to train new people, we literally cannot probably pull those people away to be able to train brand new people at this stage of the project. And I think we're unfortunately stuck in the situation which we are with the core people. What we need to be able to focus on is keeping that core people still employed with us and wanting to go forward, because losing any one of those people who have their knowledge and know what's going on here would be very detrimental to the success of our go live.
Especially at this point in time, because you're doing the testing. And, they need to validate the testing results. And when it comes down to the user acceptance testing stage, They're the ones that are literally going to have to be operating and running the system and verifying and validating. So the time requirements right now don't ease up on the muni staff.
And even a weekend when they were to go, I mean, we need them working. I mean, unfortunately, it's sad to say, we need them working the weekends now because there's so much additional work that has to be done in a variety of these areas. And in some of the data areas, we did some workarounds here. So to get us into SIP 2, we might have kicked just one little piece off just in certain area. Well, that doesn't mean that area doesn't need to be caught up. So we may stop them on data, let's say on Monday, but we still have 3 weeks before we start all over again for SIP 3, and they have to get all that work that was bypassed done in that time period so that we're ready and we don't experience any similar delays.
So, if I may, is it possible to farm some of this work out to India or Ireland or Mexico or Indonesia or somewhere?
So, Mr. Peterson, as we've talked about, from data, it's a 3-stage process for us. We have PeopleSoft, which only 50% of all of our municipal data has been PeopleSoft. The other 50% we keep talking about is the non-PeopleSoft data, that's in Excel spreadsheets. And what they have to do is people have been using their spreadsheets and mapping and manipulating all of those kind of things in that particular, well, then they have to take those and they have to map those all into a very, as you heard, a very complex SAP system. That one person who does that is the only person who knows how to take, 300 grants, break them across 1,000 projects, across 12 pay cycles, and prorate them out and map it to the appropriate tables that happen to happen in SAP. And I can go through assets and projects and grants and all of that in that same complexity. And that's the negative problem where we're at right now.
The example, is that you've got a transaction. That is clear. Everybody understands what the transaction is. But the question is, which account does it point to? Okay. And what's happening is they're finding it points to the wrong account. Okay, and so there you get into it. Oh, now only the person who really works with that transaction is going to understand. Oh, it's supposed to go in this account.
And we're also taking to utilities and combining them into one set of chart of accounts now. They've all had their own in the past. That is a huge endeavor that's never been accomplished either. And it's not been accomplished in any of these prior year cycles because they've never gotten this far. So we keep talking about the fact that we don't, what data, what can we use in the past? Well, in this situation, nothing, because we are so far beyond where they ever were before that most people don't even, the experts that we have right now have never even seen what it's supposed to look like in SAP. That's what we're dealing with right now, showing them, and then you get your aha moments, then they go, okay, now I understand. Then they have to work through it, and they get it to work. But the duration of time has taken a long time to be able to get to that
The
level.
muni is experiencing the fallout from the decision to go from 3 charts of account to 1. It's the fallout. I mean, that's what's happening.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Peterson. Before I go to you, Mr. Rhodes, I just want to make a really quick comment. I'm really, really glad that you're stressing shadow files, because that's what they're called in Excel. Because folks, when I was staff, I did shadow files because people's stuff is complicated, and that's why so many of us did shadow files. And that's the big issue in terms of the holdup. You're stressing that, and it really is. But I didn't know that half other files were shadow files. I knew there were a lot, but that's a big issue.
Almost all finance.
Yeah.
HCM has been
So-
using PeopleSoft, but
it's
finance
something
is not.
else. Thank you. Mr. Middleton.
Just following up on that, so is the idea once SAP is done, they don't use those Excel sheets
You are
anymore,
correct.
SAP is so wonderful.
You are correct.
So we just approved a contract for someone to write a program to use Excel to do stuff, I think, for one of the utilities, or the police, or some department. They don't trust SAP. So I don't get a sense that that's done.
I'm not familiar with that particular memo or something.
Approved at last assembly.
What was that?
We approved the money for a programmer to program a big Excel thing for some department.
I think it was, probably, we have.
But I asked the question, I said, why are you doing this when SAP's coming? They said, we don't trust SAP.
Anything else? No. Thank you. Mr. Train.
Going back to SAP, do we have anybody maintaining SAP for, I know we didn't upgrade all the other.
You mean PeopleSoft?
PeopleSoft, sorry. Do you have anybody at all, any staff that works on that?
I think Mr. Harris could probably speak to this from Zoll's area, but I believe there's a small contingency of IT people that do spend a little bit of their time keeping people, it's on the mainframe, they have to keep it up and running, but it's not a tremendous number of staff, but there is one or two people that probably, a portion of their jobs are responsible for making sure PeopleSoft is maintained on its current environment.
Sorry, was your question about PeopleSoft?
Yeah.
Yes, that's, answers exactly.
Those we
right.
freed up once, we shut that down.
Well,
SAP is running their.
thank you, Mr. Trainee. So, in essence, yes, we have people who are both dedicated to maintaining PeopleSoft, which we would make sure we maintain until, we have some data, I believe, that we did not decide to migrate over. So we'll need to go back from time to time, perhaps grants data for something that's 18 years old and so forth. But we'll still have people who maintain the mainframe. We are certainly at this moment having some discussions with other entities, the state principally, about doing a shared service agreement, so we could use perhaps their mainframe. So that gives us opportunities to find efficiencies as we go forward. More broadly speaking, with respect to the question of how are we beginning the preparation for post-go live period, the IT group is certainly taking on within the network communications and software piece of SAP, putting together the resources they think they're going to need in order to be able to successfully maintain the system after post-go live.
Are you gonna make sure there's no shadow files using Excel once we go to SAP?
I'll have
Are you
a-
gonna
I'll
have a
have-
procedure manual or something so we don't have
Right.
people trying to keep that process continuing?
In my experience with previous rollouts, that is always a challenge. It just takes continuing education. The people begin to see the benefits of the new enterprise software and how it can work and make that workflow more effective and easier. And people, it's a gradual process. I wish I could say it's going to happen overnight, but in my experience, it sometimes takes a little while, but it'll happen.
Which is something that's monitored constantly. I've been involved with this before with other software. And people are used to using their old software.
Yeah.
And they're not very excited about doing new ones.
It's a learning process.
And you mentioned there's some contract that expires on 3/31.
That's the operating support contract, and that's what Holden's talked about earlier.
So then are we signing a new one or?
Well, they've been in negotiations for many months on a new AMS contract. When we went to the assembly on 24th, that was similar to what was done
We
with the
approved it, I
HECDA.
thought.
We approved it that they should be doing it, but the actual agreement and the detail of the language is still being negotiated. I've been told that we're on track to sign one by tomorrow, but I'm not an active participant in that, but I've seen there's plenty of people in the building working on it right now, but they are trying to do that. And if we don't, they may work at risk to try to just continue on after that. There's a potential of a clause that that SAP is asking to be put in every one of their documents that might be a holdup.
Would you let the Sunday know if in fact it was signed? Because I'm just concerned when we've got 3/31 happening tomorrow. I don't want to go to 4/1 and find out it wasn't done.
I know the teams are actively working on trying to get resolution to that.
I know. I just want to make sure it's done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. I just have a couple of quick questions, okay? You mentioned Universe, and I know the value of having financial reporting embedded in Universe. A lot of staff, and now I need to use it. So the question is, when we go live in October, is Universe, financial reporting going to be everyone in Universe, or maybe close?
Well, Universe only points to PeopleSoft. And at this point in time, very limited effort has been put forward to what SAP is going to be able to have to be able to do that. We will put some efforts towards, in training people how to run queries, do that kind of stuff. But there is certainly a need to have some expertise within the IT department to create that. It is one of those areas that when we go live, probably would not be as robust and as we would expect.
Well, the fact of the matter is, when PeopleSoft went live, Universe, it wasn't a Universe right away. Anyway, eventually it was, and people were really happy.
I think that's an area where it's going to be developed. A lot of stuff is going to be developed after.
Okay, and another quick question. You were talking about SNAPRA, okay? Are you talking about preparation of the financial statements?
The
That part of it?
consolidated financial report, yeah, that's what that
The
is.
preparation, well, I know that, but there are two elements here. There is the CAFA, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, and it's the city's financial statements, and they prepare them, and then they're audited by our independent auditors. But you were talking about some timeframes, and I was a little bit confused, because in terms, when the time frame in consideration of audit is certainly different than when the financial statements are presented. So I guess my question is to you, Mr. Harris, when does the Controller Division actually prepare the financial statements for the previous year? Because what you're talking about right now, I think, is 2016 financial statements.
2018.
Let me
No, it
just,
would be 2017. Mr. Harris, please.
So what we're working on now are the 2016 financial
Right,
reports.
right.
And that's this period of time where we do both the closeout for the 13th and 14th month, where we take all the stuff that hasn't quite hit our books yet, get it input in and so forth. As Alden has mentioned, some of the folks who are SMEs and sort of therefore key both to understanding the data and the translation of PeopleSoft with an Excel spreadsheet are in fact some of the same people we would be relying upon to help us make sure that when the auditors ask for some information or clarification on a piece of something that's happened, they're the same people that we'd be going to and asking for that. So I've had a series of conversations with the controllers staff, the acting controller, about how we sort of do that balance, because we realize that we're in a crunch and we want to make sure SAP gets done first. But right now the balancing act is making sure that we have attention paid to SAP, and yet at the same time we're getting the CAFR done. As you know, last year the CAFR was about 4 months late because the state was late getting us data. This year the state has promised that they'll have information to us in the middle of April, and related to GASB 68, the PERS liabilities. So we actually, I don't want to put it this way, but if we had some float anywhere in the system right now, that float would be with the CAFR. That if the auditors say, where's this information, and it takes a day or 2 or 3 days longer to get it to them, in my view, that's okay, and I'll have a conversation with either the audit committee or the assembly or auditors about that, recognizing we're just in a little bit of crunch time here with SAP.
Right, and I appreciate all that, and I understand all that, but my point that I'm trying to make is that, we're talking about going live on October 2nd, and it really is not going to have anything to do with the 2017 CAFA.
That's exactly
Right, that was the point I was trying to make. But thank you, Mr. Harris.
and Madam Chair, what was in Zig's presentation there was in the project plan. In the scope that SAP is responsible, they're supposed to do 10 of the documents that are contained within the entire book. So that was all the prep time that they need to do the functional spec and the design and the development of those 10 documents that are in there. You are absolutely correct. Those 10 documents won't actually be used until next year on this year's entire financials. But because they're in the scope right now, we don't want SAP to get out the door without doing what they were contracted to do, which is these 10. There are many more than 10 in that document, and we will either have to do them ourselves or contract somebody else. But in the current scope is 10, and in Zig's presentation, what he was referring to was the time allocated to do those 10 reports, which, as I mentioned, we began 2 weeks ago, starting the work sessions with our existing staff to do that. We're trying to hold SAP accountable for the 10 documents that they were in scope to prepare.
Thank you. There's no one else. Thank you very much for your presentation. This is my last meeting, so just please invite me to the party.